Hello friends, I'm Steve Kibble. You're watching the Dominion Report. As we've mentioned, the Donald Trump administration has initiated a trade war by putting tariffs on numerous goods crossing from Canada. Trump has claimed various reasons, about 10 of them actually, for his implementation of the tariffs, and all of them are false. We're going to go through a bunch of them, and this is one of them. And with this video, we're going to talk about trade deficits. I want you to think about when you go to the grocery store and buy groceries. You go there, you select the groceries that you want, you give them some money, and then you leave. And when you leave, you have less money. That means you now have a trade deficit with the grocery store. But despite the fact that you left with less money, you also left with groceries. So that doesn't make the grocery store your enemy. The trade deficit tracks only the money. It doesn't track the goods going in the other direction. Now further, and this part is actually quite important, you didn't have to spend the money in the grocery store. You chose to spend the money in the grocery store, and you could have chosen to spend your money in a different grocery store or at a restaurant or something completely unrelated to groceries. That was your choice. That's how a trade deficit works. People and corporations buy things, and sometimes they buy them from other countries. They pay money for them, and it's a free market capitalist economy that happens to get tracked because it purchases cross a border. Trump has claimed that the trade deficit is $200 billion, which is completely incorrect. The real number is about 45 billion US dollars, or in Canadian, about 60 billion. I'm going to talk about US dollars because with this video particularly, we really want our US friends to understand this. Okay, here comes a bunch of numbers I'm going to throw at you. They're important because it's important to understand how this trade deficit fits into the bigger picture. So, and when I tell you these numbers, remember that, keep in mind that Canada is the #1 purchaser of US goods and the second biggest overall trading partner that the US has. Okay, the 45 billion trade deficit is about 1/5 the size of the deficit that the US has with Mexico. And it's about 1/8 the size of the deficit that it has with China. So actually, of the entire trade deficit that the United States has with all countries combined, Canada represents only 4%. Now, we should note that of everything that the US buys from Canada, about 1/3 of that is energy, oil, gas, and electricity. Oil alone is about $100 billion. So if one were to look at the trade deficit without including oil, it would actually be a surplus of around $55 billion. Canada's oil is heavy crude. So that means that it comes out of the ground with sulfur and other chemicals in it that need to be removed before being processed. The US has special refineries set up to do just this. And that gives high-paying jobs to US citizens. So because it needs processing, the US buys Canadian oil at a discount relative to what less heavy crude would be. And then that's about 10 to 15%. And what the US actually does is they pull their own oil out of the ground and they sell it to other countries. And for their own consumption, they buy oil from Canada at about a 10 to 15% discount. So that's a profit that they make by selling their clean oil and buying heavy crude from Canada. So if they really wanted to have less of a trade deficit, in fact, a trade surplus they could have, they could just stop buying Canadian oil and they could just consume their own oil. And they would lose out on that 10 to 15% by selling it to other markets, and they would lose out on a bunch of oil and gas, well-paying jobs in the country. So this reasoning of trade deficits makes no sense. As you can see, the idea that a trade deficit is bad for the U.S. is patently false. We'll talk about more. We're gonna talk about some more of these things, that these claims that are being made, and I'm gonna try to make a video about why I think it's actually happening. But I'd like to hear from you. So why don't you tell me why you think the tariffs are happening? And please go ahead and let me know in the comment below or send me an email. I'd love to hear from you. In the meantime, stay calm, stay strong, and elbows out.